Epictetus said that you become what you give attention to. These days, it seems that everything is pulling on our attention, and this mess of content and constant blaming of problems left, right, and center is making us a mess. So something I've personally been working on is trying to filter out most of what isn't that important. So besides deleting social media, news, and email apps from my phone and unsubscribing from newsletters or anything that wants to send me a notification, I have also been thinking about the importance of events or ideas that I pay attention to. As politicians thrive on being the center of attention, they spend more time creating news that isn't actually news, whether that's tariffing one thing or taxing another, declaring war on something else, yet so much of it doesn't even happen. And when you zoom out, most of it doesn't really compare in the slightest to actually important things in the world or important things in your life, such as your friendships or what you work on. On my new show, How to Change the World, I developed a framework for thinking about how important or impactful an idea is. And after I did that, I found it gave me a much more bird's eye view when it comes to looking down on the noise of current politics today. It really helped me see it as just that, some noise distracting me from the actually important things that I should be doing. So as the idea helps me so much with my own mindset, and here on the Growth Mindset Psychology Show, we talk about mindset, I thought I'd share that framework with you today by playing some of that episode for you. Yes, it might sound like it's about technology, but if you go beyond the surface level and think about what it is that I'm actually talking about, you'll definitely pick up on some deeper themes and mindsets that really will apply to your life. So on that, without further ado, here is the episode. Imagine an asteroid is heading towards your apartment. You can save either your freshly brewed morning coffee or your mobile phone. Well, you probably intuitively know which is more important to you, but do you know which is more important to humanity? And if you just yelled, "It's still the phone," well, slow down, because history has opinions. Imagine every invention ever was stacked on a giant Jenga tower. At the bottom, fire, language, the wheel. If you pull one of these out, the whole tower collapses. Game over. Higher up we have jeans, Cheetos, a weird hanging basket you ordered at 3 a.m. But where would Buddhism fit in this tower compared to, say, TikTok? Well, enter the Innovation Richter scale. With it, we can treat ideas like earthquakes. They are unruly, occasionally disruptive, but they are also measurable. Most days we wobble through a few microquakes, an app update here, a new emoji there, but a very rare few ideas register as continent splitters, rewriting human history. And somewhere in our future lies an inevitable monster quake, ready to change everything we know. So, if you've ever wondered if football is more important than credit cards, well, by the end of this episode, you'll be able to rank any creation, a religion or a recipe, a rocket or a rat catcher, and I promise you, you'll never look at a toaster or an international treaty in the same way. So hold on to your thinking caps. We are going to tour through 1,000,000 years of civilization rocking innovation in one episode. Hello and welcome to a short teaser episode of my new show, How to Change the World, where I am personally looking through the entire history of innovation in chronological order to build a blueprint for progress. In between each history episode, I do a frameworks episode that introduces mental models and ideas that you probably won't have heard of that help you think more like an innovator. So this episode is one of those as I build out the concept of the Innovation Richter scale, which is one of the most fundamental tools that I will be using for the entire show to decide what is basically an innovation worth talking about. This is an idea that I have adapted from Nate Silver, who introduced the technological Richter scale in his book On the Edge. However, humanity is shaped by more than just technology, so I am widening the lens to all innovation. This means that we can measure the width, the depth, and the staying power of any idea in history. And why would we bother doing this? Well, when the Richter scale was introduced for seismology and earthquakes, it was an essential step to spotting patterns, and it really helped develop better models for earthquake prediction and management. So I think a way to measure the impact of ideas could be very similar for us. It also, at a personal level, lets us rank our own ideas without ego or opinion, and it might help you appreciate the quiet magnitude of the inventions that you use daily and perhaps rarely notice. And in case you missed the first episode and are wondering how we're going to use this scale, it's going to be our decision framework for the entire show. So each history episode, we will only discuss the most important ideas ever, and we won't get lost in all the fascinating chaos and side quests of history. And so today, we will explore all sorts of inventions at different levels and their impacts on society. And I found the exercise of creating this episode endlessly fascinating, so I'm treating you to some of my favorite findings. Firstly, before we get into it, I'd just like to quickly explore the metaphor of the seismological Richter scale, because it has two main rules that perfectly fit our own needs for measuring the impact of ideas. Number one, seismologists measure the energy that an earthquake releases, which then affects how much it shakes the world, quite literally. And so a level 2 earthquake might rattle a glass somewhere, whilst a level 9 will literally break city blocks. Now, we of course are measuring how much an idea shakes society, which fits nicely as a comparison. And the second rule is that the earthquake Richter scale is logarithmic. And that's science speak for a little change is really a huge freaking deal. It means that for 1 point on the scale, you have 10 times the amount of movement. So a jump from a 3 to a 4 on the Richter scale has 10 times more ground motion and actually 32 times more energy released, if you're interested in the details. And this is crucial because it's easy to look at a lot of inventions and just think they are all so important. But let's say you look at Post-its or Velcro. The world without them would be very strange, but they are a mile away from the impact of aqueducts or democracy. The thing about these two rules is it creates two big other similarities. The first one being the regularity of occurrences. So Earth sees millions of tremors a year, but maybe one magnitude level 9 quake a century and one level 8 quake a decade. And when we look at ideas and innovations, we see the same thing. The second curious similarity is the concept of foreshocks and aftershocks. In the lead up to a full earthquake, you see an increasing rate and power of earthquakes, and then, of course, afterwards there are aftershocks. And with ideas, Friendster, Bebo, MySpace led up to Facebook. Afterwards, we get things like groups, Farmville, Marketplace. Also, separate innovation ideas lead up to a bigger quake, so touchscreens, iPods, 3G, Blackberries leading up to the iPhone, after which you get things like Uber, Tinder, Shazam, Google Maps. And once you started seeing this pattern, you can't really unsee it, and the timeline of ideas in history is like a seismograph in motion. And I'm sure you probably noticed that lately, there has been a lot of activity. Okay, and now my final point before we get into the spicy job of using the ranking system is that yes, this is a ranking system, but it has nothing to do with good or bad. It is about magnitude and not morality. Just as my height is my height is just a fact, it isn't an opinion. So let's say that you do love Post-it notes. That's great. Me too, actually. But they aren't as impactful on society as electricity. And yes, I think that's easy to be objective about. But if you were to start ranking something like football or maybe a religion, well, those might be very meaningful to you or someone else. And if we were to compare them against the invention of language itself and the ability to communicate with other human beings, well, we are just putting a number on impact and it isn't anything personal. So keep that in mind as I rank crucifixion to karaoke, horses to houses, Brexit to Bitcoin. Let's get into it already. I'll just start at level 1 and go upwards. Firstly, a level 1 innovation is basically like a random thought in the shower. Perhaps you hum a tune once and forget it. Maybe a witty pun that slips your mind. The impact of a level 1 innovation on the world goes no further than the momentary flashing through your synapses that disappears and is lost forever. So let's move on to level 2. This is an idea that you put into action, but it probably never goes beyond you. perhaps it's the way you organize your suitcase or highlight your notes. In the 15th century, maybe a farmer puts a knot in his rope to hang his personal scythe, but, that's it. So we can move right on to a level 3. Here we're talking about official ideas, something that you unleash onto the public, but let's say it has a low impact. Could be a recipe you share online or a piece of science research that's published but never referenced. In 1660, someone tried doing blood transfusions from sheep to humans, which was a disaster and quickly banned. Although nothing screams innovation like trying to replace your blood with the blood of a sheep, sadly it was less of a medical breakthrough and more of a bad idea. Okay, perhaps that was an unwitty pun that belonged to stay in the level 1 category and should never have left my brain. I'm sorry, but level 3 is the place for messing around. So there you go. A different example of a level 3 could perhaps be, say, somebody starting a podcast where only their family and friends listen to it and no one else. So coincidentally, I have some reviews in for the show. It's great. What a journey this promises to be. Looking forward to sharing it with you. That's from my mum. And I am looking forward to share the journey with you too, Mum. Mums are the best. Now, if you would like to leave a review, I'd be delighted to move the show from a level 3 to a Richter level 4 innovation, which could only be done with your help. And now, I shall actually move on with the show and stop messing around in level 3, as you are probably asking, what is a level 4? Well, a level 4 is an invention successful enough that it has some popularity. People like it and use it regularly and share it with their friends. Coincidentally, how all good podcasts grow. But seriously, if you were to think commercially, a level 4 invention can be defined by someone willing to pay you for it. And at this point, it's worth remembering that we are on a logarithmic scale. So there's a very big difference between a 4.0 innovation and a 4.9 innovation here. At the low end, you might have an idea that could create a single job, like a good YouTube channel or a patent for a specific microphone to record bats with. Great for like one person's job. On the higher end, entire small firms might thrive off creating a level 4 innovation. Items like a fidget spinner or a robot vacuum knockoff, or maybe a really big YouTube channel. And now let's move on to level 5, where things get a little bit more mainstream. A level 5 would be like a product that owns its personal aisle, Levi jeans that changed workwear. It could be a brand that's shorthand for its category, like Kleenex or Marmite. A level 5 might even reshape an entire vertical. At the top end, you get something like the Gillette safety razor. When it launched in 1903, they sold 51 razors and 168 blades. Not a lot, but by 1918, the US Army was issuing them to every serviceman in the country, and Gillette was selling over 30 million blades a year. Competitors were retooling their factories, marketing playbooks were being rewritten, and the fashion of men's faces changed, and it became scruffy to be seen wearing a 2-day stubble. So level 5 is where we start seeing some real noticeable changes in society. And let's talk about money. If you invented a category level 5 idea, that is enough for a fortune. A low-end 5 could make you a multi-millionaire, and a high-end could make you a multi-billionaire. However, the nice thing here is that although a level 5 has a widespread impact, regulators and philosophy professors aren't going to start showing up with their clipboards and complaining about you legally or morally. So overall, a level 5 is exciting stuff, but life ticks along as normal outside of the innovation that niche is within. So let's talk about level 6. This is where an innovation graduates from a success within its niche to a culture-wide shakeup, and it would be a contender for the invention of the year. A modern example of a level 6 would be something like YouTube or Uber or Netflix. The scale is really ramping up quite fast already. So let's discuss the hallmarks of a solid level 6. Firstly, it will have ubiquity within its sector. By the end of a single decade, it will feel odd not using a level 6 invention. Secondly, there'll be a cross-domain spillover. So when the barcode was launched, it began as a time-saving device for supermarkets, but it became an essential part of logistics and bookstores. If you go to a hospital, you get a barcode on your wrist. And then the third part of a level 6 is a visible behavior change within society. Airbnb made travelers comfortable sleeping in strangers' homes. Skype and Zoom unlocked remote work. And it's not just us members of the public who notice it. Economists will probably see a productivity change and start noticing entire new careers emerging. Regulators will be scrambling to keep up. Just think of Airbnb and Uber that had entire new policy changes for cities. However, despite all of this, at a personal level, you can still opt out of a level 6 completely. You don't need a Netflix account, you don't need to have the Uber app, and you still won't really notice a difference in your life. Then in terms of economic value, a level 6 would start at around a few $1 billion at the low end, and it would top out at around $1 trillion, maybe a few $1 trillion. So as we're seeing, the logarithmic scale does have a big range, as I've mentioned. So we can quickly just explore the ranges here. At the low end of a level 6, you'd have something like the Post-it note or the biro, tiny gadgets, but on almost every desk on Earth. At a mid-range, we might have Velcro or the microwave or even pizza. Yes, you might be surprised, but the global pizza industry is worth about $160 billion a year, the same as pasta. Then at the top end, you might have something like YouTube, which is worth $550 billion. Coincidentally, the exact same value as the global sales of rice each year. Now, of course, monetary value isn't the only thing. So there is a fair argument that rice provides the main energy source of 3.5 billion people, so that could make it more important than YouTube, as it's just one of many entertainment sources for 2.5 billion people. And in fact, I'm sure plenty of people would rank pizza as more important than YouTube. Perhaps you do. And this raises a fun debate. Why not? If you want to think about it, yes, there are lots of pizza restaurants and pizza companies, but YouTube is also responsible for about 500,000 full-time jobs just in the United States alone. And then how many skills are taught across the world for free because of YouTube? Our initial gut reaction here starts to be like, I wonder which one is more important. Personally, I would love to see the entire world vote on whether they would want to keep YouTube in existence or pizza. My first reaction is that the vote would go towards pizza, but when you think about it, it actually could be closer than you'd expect. Okay, sorry for the philosophical diversion. Back to the scale. Let's look at level 7. Here we are having another big step up. We're talking about ubiquitous events that define a decade and meaningfully impact the lives and everyday behavior of millions of people. So we're looking at technologies like social media, GPS, air conditioning. Within a decade of these inventions, they reshape how we work, how we play, even how we fall in love. Okay, some signs of a level 7 innovation. Firstly, near universal adoption. Opting out of it is possible but very awkward. Secondly, a multi-industry overhaul. GPS completely changed logistics, insurance, warfare, and even dating apps, as I mentioned. Thirdly, there is an institutional scramble. There's new laws, new degrees, many new job titles appearing overnight, social media manager, drone pilot, etc. And then the value to the economy is multi-trillion dollars and above at today's levels. In a level 7 innovation, we'll start to see fundamental platforms which allow for level 6 technologies to exist. So Uber, Netflix, YouTube, they all run upon web servers. And if you want to think about the range of a level 7, at the bottom end, we'd have something like bank cards. They allow for the credit industry, which changed the spending habits of households and global consumer behavior and has a huge economic impact on the amount of trade and business that gets done. And at the high end of a 7, we have things like social media, which completely changed culture, marketing, how we think about status, and what it's like to be a teenager. Now, an interesting point at a level 7 on the technology side is that we find it's rare to see a single product or brand, and we generally move towards a platform or technology. So for example, we're talking about something like GPS rather than Google Maps. You might say that Facebook or Google search could be a level 7, possibly, but social media itself is of course definitely more important to the world than Facebook, which is just undeniable. And if you want some examples from the past, whilst we're talking about level 7s, the wheeled chariot, aqueducts, or Roman concrete, all a solid level 7. So yes, fundamentally exciting innovations, but now we are getting on to level 8, coming up after the break. Level 8. This is more than just big news. A level 8 redraws the blueprint of civilization, and any invention in this category will be on the shortlist for innovation of the century. We are talking about things like antibiotics that not only slashed childhood mortality by 25%, they also extended the average human lifespan by a whopping 25 years. So, welcome to the big time. Some hallmarks of a level 8 event. Firstly, a level 8 will completely interrupt every major sector. The internet didn't just change communication, it changed our work, our leisure, our shopping, and even science. Secondly, a level 8 also marks a generational baseline reset. This means that children born after a level 8 event can't imagine a world before it. I mean, try explaining to someone who's grown up with smartphones what it's like to not have a device attached to you the whole time. They literally wouldn't know how to navigate around their city, let alone trying to navigate around the world. Finally, the adoption of a level 8 is a bit of an existential crisis for a country, and if you ignore it, your nation will fall behind. So a classic level 8 could be the steam engine. So nations like Ottoman Turkey in Qing China failed to adopt it and they fell behind. The steam engine ended up rewriting entire industries, changing manufacturing, warfare, and of course a huge surge in mining. To give you some perspective, a 20-hour canal ride from Liverpool to Manchester became just a 2-hour train ride, which completely changed the speed and price of global trade. But it's more than that. The world in fact had to standardize time. Before trains, an individual town would just run off their own clock. Afterwards, the whole country had to run on the same time because otherwise the train system didn't work. So it changed even some of these intangible concepts of everyday life. Another thing we'll notice here is that if you try to put a dollar figure on a level 8, it's almost meaningless. A level 8 innovation touches every balance sheet, so the entire economy as we know it would be entirely different without it. Try estimating the financial impact of electricity. Sure, yes, the electricity industry has a size, but your phone, your TV wouldn't exist without electricity, neither would refrigerators or skyscrapers or satellites or light bulbs. It's so deeply embedded into human existence, it's like trying to put a value on water or oxygen. At this point, a level 8 just is, and you kind of accept that it's really important. That is why this podcast is focused on only level 8 and above, because level 8 is crazy, awesome, important stuff that we should know about. And there's lots of events in history that we kind of forget. Now, whilst we're here, I could go on about level 8s all day, but I have an entire show to cover the rest of them. So I'll save it for the next 10 years. We've got over 100 episodes lined up. Every one of them, by definition, a game changer. And that leads us on to level 9. There are only a handful of level 9 innovations ever. At most one per era, and they unalterably change the entire arc of civilization. So what defines a level 9 innovation? Well, we'll see a species-wide pivot. Every human life after it is impacted in a big way. Take agriculture. It led to the first towns and cities, the hoarding of wealth, and the creation of empires and civilization as we know it. Another feature of level 9 is that there isn't really an off switch. Once it's been discovered, it's rather hard for it to be uninvented, and it can really just be managed or survived. So when we learned to navigate the oceans and discovering the Americas and Australia, we unified the planet's ecosystems, transferring entire species, cultures, diseases across the globe. It spawned new industries, sugar, tobacco, the Atlantic slave trade, and in the process, entire empires were forged whilst other empires collapsed. Right, the final attribute of a level 9 is the huge amount of leverage it creates. A whole garden of level 8 innovations can grow in the shade of a level 9. So take writing, for example. It allowed the recording of knowledge and became the bedrock of trade, finance, law. Because of writing, we get things like the first dynasties and again, empires. But we also get the Bible, and later it gives us science and mass media. So it's an innovation so big that it's the foundation for the things that we might think of normally as innovation. For me, a really good thought experiment for both a level 8 and a level 9 is trying to attempt to imagine the world if it didn't exist. If a level 7 invention didn't exist, like GPS, yeah, it's a massive pain. But life can go on. But trying to imagine a world without houses, like what would we be doing? Do we live in caves, tents? What on earth would a city even look like? Do we have cities? Your brain's just like, human civilization needs houses. It's just a fact. That's it. I don't know what else do we do. So yes, that's a great test. And essentially, a level 9 completely rewrites the rules. And of course, that might beg the question, what the hell is a level 10? Well, if level 9 is rewriting the rules, a level 10 is rewriting the species. So let's briefly revisit the seismology metaphor for a second. Seismologists tell us that a magnitude 10 earthquake has never been recorded and possibly had never happened because it would need a fault line that wraps the entire planet. And a fun fact is that if we follow the Richter scale even higher, a level 13 earthquake would literally break the Earth into 2 pieces. That is logarithms for you. But anyway, Invention has an equivalent to a level 10. It is a breakthrough so vast that it ends the current chapter of humanity and even opens a new geological period of Earth's history. So if we wanted to look for a reference point, you could possibly argue that the control of fire was a level 10. It drove the creation of our species as we know it. Cooked food allowed our guts to shrink by 10 feet, and it allowed us to spend 10 times less time eating than our chimpanzee cousins, so curious amount of 10s already. Morphologically, cooking food changed our jaw, our face, and our brain, and it allowed us to stop living in the trees of Africa and become the invasive apex predator that dominated the entire world. So I feel like this is a level 10. You might also want to propose the invention of language itself and possibly even the agricultural revolution, which are at least high 9s, potentially 10, depends on how you want to look at it. But regardless, combining fire, language, and agriculture, that gave rise to human civilization and our current epoch of the Holocene. When we look to the next level 10 event, that would create a new epoch. And the really crazy thing is that could happen within our lifetimes. To which you might ask, how might this happen? Well, of course, top of mind lately has been artificial intelligence. It has many names, AGI, the singularity, but it is just a silicon-based intelligence greatly more powerful than our carbon-based life forms. Essentially, a mind that can improve itself faster than we can comprehend, leaving us like ants in the dust compared to its overseeing powers. The questions, of course, are would it be our ally or our overlord or something beyond those words? Who knows? Imagine if Google Maps decided that we were the traffic problem and it rerouted humanity into extinction. It's possible, but let's talk about some other potential 10 events. Nuclear fusion possibly could cause a level 10. If we can harness the power that the stars use, we could create an energy abundance that, if we felt like it, we could desalinate the oceans or turn Mars into a suburb. We could make whatever climate we feel like, and we'd start thinking in terms of planets rather than nations. Another level 10 could be rewriting our genetics, thus evolving Homo sapiens into something post-human. It might sound unlikely now, but remember that companies are already genetically recreating extinct animals, and that we already have gene therapies to remove genetic diseases from humans. So, what is really stopping someone from targeting genes to give a little extra help in aging or intelligence or speed or beauty? And then, because that's happening, people do it a bit more, and so on and so forth until we have superhumans. So, interesting times. And if we want to think about the impact of a level 10, it's very hard to quantify. Of course, economists can't. They basically became useless at a level 8. By level 10, they're long gone. Ethicists would probably lack the vocabulary to describe a level 10, and history teachers get an entire new chapter 1. Lucky me. Of course, the thing with a level 10 is that we don't know if we'll have an abundant flourishing with a new age for humanity or an abrupt game over. But it does seem like it can't be a neutral event. In the words of the philosopher Nick Bostrom, we are playing with cosmic fire. So what a time to be alive. We often wonder what it would have been like to live through the fall of the Roman Empire or the scientific revolution. But we, my friends, have the privilege to potentially watch the dawn of something much more spectacular. So just think of that. We could witness something created that is more important than pizza or YouTube, and perhaps even language itself. So We live in possibly the most thrilling and equally terrifying moment to be holding front row tickets to watch the play of history unfold. Okay, so that was a light intro to the Innovation Richter scale, an idea that I fleshed out for my new podcast, How to Change the World, where I go through the history of innovation from the start of humanity to the modern day. In it, as I mentioned, I will tell the story of every single level 8 and above innovation that has occurred, from the obvious things like the internet and electricity to the unobvious things like clay, which if you didn't know, clay gave us the first reliable bricks for houses and roads, pots for cooking and storage, pipes for water and sewers, and clay was even the first thing that we wrote upon. So there's going to be lots of surprising things to learn about, and I think if you enjoy this show, you will enjoy that one. If you search for it on your podcast player, it's called How to Change the World, the History of Innovation. Also, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to get more hands-on with the scale, there is actually a second half to the episode where I flesh out how to use the scale by considering other aspects to it, like the global percentage of humans impact or how much joy, terror, or purpose the innovation gives into our lives. And to add in these elements to the scale, I break down some other examples by exploring politics, sports, weapons, and religion. So some hot topics to start rating on scales. And if you want to know if Brexit is more important than baseball or if guns are as impactful as Christianity, well, there is only one way to find out, by subscribing to my new show, How to Change the World. And not to give too many things away, politics is probably not as important as you think it is. For example, Brexit only ranks as a level 6 on the Innovation Richter scale. And yeah, sure, it was important for me as a British person and mildly annoying for the rest of the EU, but most of the world doesn't really care in the slightest. In fact, I can bet you that 99% of the news that you consume on a day-to-day basis is less than a level 6 on the level of importance. And that might just make you wonder if you could instead spend a bit more time learning things or getting involved in actually important global stuff, or just simply paying attention to local things that are actually important to you. So I hope that's given you a bit of a different way of looking at the world and perhaps a nudge towards a less cluttered newsfeed and a more focused attention span by hitting you with some alternative ideas on what actually is important in the lives of humans. And as you know, I do love finding evidence for things that are good for you in unlikely or unusual places. Now, on that, if you have a friend who is wasting their precious life by reacting to everything all the time as it happens, perhaps you could share this episode with them, as that is how the show grows and how you culture the type of mindset and thinking in your local environment with the friends that you spend time with. And on the subject of people you spend time with, if you ever felt like you wanted to have a short chat with me sometime, I do have slots on a Wednesday afternoon that you can book for free by looking in the episode description and clicking on the link or emailing me, because I like to see what people are up to across the world. And it's been amazing to meet different people from Timbuktu to Okinawa, United States to other parts of Portugal. I have really enjoyed these conversations and I hope to continue them. And with that, here is a nice quote. Stop waiting for Friday, for summer, for someone to fall in love with you. Stop waiting for life. Happiness is achieved when you stop waiting for it and you make the most of the moment you are in now. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause. Silence. To reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.